We are on 174b, last 5 lines. So we are going to start today with the coffee, without the coffee. So, Omer Rav Huna Ashchivmira, our favorite friend, the guy who's dying, Ashchivmira, what he did was he took all of his property, he sanctified it. There's a little bit of a contradiction. He just sanctified all of his property, and then he says, by the way, I actually owe that guy $1. So you just sanctified all your property, and now you owe a guy $1. So how do you view that? Says the Gemara. He's believed. He's believed. Why? Chazaka, there's a presumption. Ein adam osek kinunya al hektish. We're not going to trick hektish. We're not going to trick the temple property. So if you actually owe somebody money, even though you just sanctified all your property, but if you owe somebody money, then we believe you. So it sounds like only for hektish, only for the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, are you not going to pull any tricks. But for everybody else, you might. Let's see if that's true. Maskef l'Rav Nachman v'chi adam osek kinunya al panav. Does a person pull tricks? Does he do a trick with his kids? So that's what it sounds like. So, hektish, you don't do tricks. Everyone else, you do tricks. Let's see if that's true. The Rav and Shmuel, the Army Travaya, both Rav and Shmuel said, Shchiv me'ra, a guy who's dying, Shomer mana leploni. So a guy's dying and he says, Mana leploni biadi. I have someone else's money in my hands, meaning I owe him money. So now it depends. Amar tenu nosnin, lo amar tenu ein nosnin. If he says give him the money, then we give him the money. But if he doesn't say give him the money, then we don't give him the money. So 1 second, he just said he has someone else's money in his hands. Why do you need the directive of give to give the money? Doesn't he owe the guy money? Apparently, unless he says tenu, we assume he's playing some kind of trick. Well, what's the trick exactly? He's saying alma adam asu shlola has bi as banav. This comes up sometimes. A person wants that their children, especially if he's rich, he doesn't want everyone to know that he's rich. So he's just saying, I owe somebody money just to, that people shouldn't think that he's like, this rich guy. Look, I also have debts, So that's if he doesn't say tenu. But if he does say tenu, then you give it to him. What do you see? A person on their deathbed, even when they're not talking about hektish, also sometimes pull these kinds of things. Although also shall has be as bana. So says the Gemara, Hachanami, next page, Adam asu shalola has be as atzmo. So say the same thing towards hektish. Why do you assume a guy that says I sanctified all my property and I owe a guy $1, I owe a guy a money, whatever, $100? Why do you assume he's not going to play tricks on hektish? Maybe he's just saying he owes somebody money so that he shouldn't make it seem like he's a rich guy. That's all he's doing. So how come by that when it comes to the temple, when you say I sanctified all my property, but I owe somebody money, we believe you because you're not going to take money away from hektish, or you're not going to pull a trick on hektish. But when it comes to your kids, all of a sudden you do say that you owe people money even though you don't, to make it seem like you're not a rich guy. So just say the same logic by the Temple Mount, by Beis Hamikdash. Say the same thing over there. When you said you owe the guy $100, you didn't really owe it. It was just you're doing this that you shouldn't, so to speak, satiate yourself, meaning make yourself look rich. And yet we don't say that. So by hektish, by the Beis Hamikdash, we believe you that you owe the guy $100. And by a regular case, we assume you're just saying that to make yourself not look rich. What's the difference? How come by hektish we believe you, and how come in general we don't believe you? So, Kikama Rav Huna, when Rav Huna said his statement, by hektish, where we do believe you, it was a very different case. It was dinakit shtar. He was holding a shtar. Says the Gemara, sounds like by Rav and Shmuel, by a regular case, Mechlal de Rav and Shmuel de lo nakit shtar. It sounds like Rav and Shmuel weren't holding a shtar. So when you're holding a shtar, it says, I owe this guy money, then we believe you. When you're not holding a shtar, then we don't believe you. So it's not really about hektish versus not hektish. It's about if you're holding a document or not. If the document says I owe money, then you owe money. If it doesn't, then we assume you're just satiating yourself to make yourself not look rich. So Michlal de Rav Shmuel lo naked shtara. But hold on, the case of Rav and Shmuel was, if the guy who's dying says Tanu, give, we believe him. So says the Gemara, Amar Tanu, no snin. Saying give, that's a milva al pehave. If you just say give, that has the status of an oral loan. So an oral loan, Rav Shmuel Amri Travayu, they both say that an oral loan, Eino Gova, you don't collect, Lo min Yorshin, not from the inheritors, Velo min Lakuchos, not from the purchasers. So it can't be that the difference is one is a document and one is an oral loan, because Rav and Shmuel say that when you say something that an oral loan, you cannot collect with. So back to the drawing board. What's the difference between the case of Hektish of Rav Huna and the case of a guy and his children? By Hektish, you do believe him that he owes $100, and by his children, you don't believe him. Elam or Rav Nachman, Idi Naked Shtari. Both cases, the guy has a document, and the document says that he owes guy money. So then, what's the discrepancy? The lokasha hadamakuyim hatalomakuyim. The difference is, by the case of Rav Huna, it was already verified. That's why you owe him $100. In our case, it wasn't verified. And on that, the Gemara says by Rav and Shmuel, Amar Tenu, if he says give him money, so then kaimei l'shtari, then it's like validating the document. And if he doesn't say Tenu, then it remains an unverified document, lo kaimei l'shtari, and therefore you don't have to. Therefore you assume that he's just doing this to satiate himself. So basically, when you have a directive of Tenu, you take this guy who's dying very seriously. You don't assume he's just saying these things to satiate, to make himself not look rich. When he doesn't say Tenu, so that's like a non-verified document. There's always a chance he's just saying this to make himself not look rich, and therefore we're not going to believe him, as opposed to the case of Hektish or the Beis HaMikdash, where the guy says he's sanctified all his property, and then he said that I owe somebody money. There we had a document that was verified, so therefore we believe him. Yeah. Amar Rabba Shchiv Meirasa. Now a Shchiv Meirasa Amar Mana Leploni Biyadi. So now two cases. One case is Mana Leploni Biyadi. That guy's money is in my hands, so meaning I owe him money. And then the orphans say Amru Yisomim, meaning the guy said this, then he died, and the Yisomim come and say Paranu. We already paid back. We paid back. Ne'emanim. They're believed to say they paid back. Tinu manela ploni, go give money to somebody else. The amru, and then the guy died, and then the orphans come and say, amru, yisom and paranu, we already paid back. Ein ne'emanim. Then they're not believed. So it's a funny thing. In the first case where he says, I have that guy's money in my hands, they're believed. When he says more directively, he says it much straighter. Tenu, go give it. There he's not believed. So the Gemara says, Klape laya. It's always like, in what direction are you going? Basically, like this logic doesn't make any sense. When he says it more directively, then you don't believe him, and less direct, you do believe him. So he says, Ipcha mistabra. The opposite makes more sense. Literally, the exact opposite of what you said is much more logical. So Amar Tenu Maneh. When you say Tenu, which is a directive, go give. Then he dies. Then they say we paid back. Kevan de Paskavu on the mill. He said something which is very clear, a clear-cut, definite statement. So then we could believe him. Then we could say that he's believed. Money leploni biyadi says a vague statement. You should know I actually have that guy's money in my hands. That wasn't as clear. Maybe he's just saying this to make himself not look rich. Kevan de lo Paskavu on the mill. He didn't say a definite statement. So then when they say that they paid back, then we shouldn't believe them. So what are you saying? It's opposite logic. Really rephrase it and say it like this. When the Shchimira says, I have that person's money in my hands, and the orphans say that our father retracted and said he paid back, then ne'emanim. Why? My timer at kure mitkar. We assume that when he said, I have that money in my hand, I had that person's money in my hands, that caused him to remember. Like, oh yeah, I paid back. Therefore, that when he says that he paid back, we believe him. But when he says a definite statement, then we assume that first statement is taken very seriously. He says tenu. So tenu money laploni means he thought about it already, and he concluded, give that money to that person. And then if the orphans say, Amr Yisom and Chazar Ma'ava Parati, Ein Na'amanin. Then when the orphans say, oh yeah, my father retracted and said that he paid back, they're not believed, because when the original statement has a vagueness to it and the retraction is definite, that we accept. When the original statement is definite, tenu, go give, then the retraction we don't accept, because that tenu is a very definite, clear-cut statement. So there we don't believe him. That's why we don't believe him. If it's really true that he paid back, he wouldn't have said such a definite statement of lo havi amar tenu. He would never have said go and give. He would, he would say it more vaguely or something. So therefore, we don't believe him. Bayirav ashchivmira shehoda. So ashchivmira who is moda, who agrees. Someone says to the shchivmira, you owe me money, and they say I do. You're right. So now, does he have to say tzarech lomer atem edai? Does he have to specify you two are the witnesses? He's a room full of people. Does he need to specify that? Meaning, does he need witnesses? Oh, ein tzarech lomer atem edai. You don't have to say atem edai. Sounds like just people being in the room is not enough. You have to specify them. It's interesting. So now, do you need witnesses or not? So, yeah. Tzarech sheyomar ksuvu. Does he have to say to them, write down? In general, when you admit in front of witnesses, you have to tell them and write this down. Does the shchimra have to do that also? Oh, ein lo maksuv, or does not have to say and write it down? So that's 2. 3. Adam mishate b'shas misa. Would a person ever lie at the time of death? Or ein adam mishate b'shas misa? Or no, or we would never assume a person's lying when he's about to die. So we say, Basra debayi hadar pashta. After we asked the question, we came and answered, Ein adam mishate b'shas misa. A person, we don't assume he's lying at the time of death. The divrei shchimera, and the words of this is a line that's been quoted a lot. The divrei shchimera, the words of a shchimera, have that power of iksuvin, like they're written down in a document, ukim misurin damu, and like they're given over to the other guy already. So his mere words have the status of being written down and given over in a document. So that would answer our questions. It sounds like you don't need to say atem edai. We don't assume he's lying. You wouldn't need witnesses, and you don't have to say ksuvu either, because his words alone have the status of being written down. So therefore, that would answer all the questions. You don't need to specify your witnesses, and you don't need to specify write it down. We assume he's telling the truth. We assume that he really owes the money, and we assume his words have a status of being written down and given over, because that's either biblical we saw or a rabbinic enactment. We didn't want to speed up his death, so we really trust him, and we assume that the guy's not going to lie before he dies. These are concepts that we've come up a lot of times, and now it's an explicit Mishnah. Whenever you loan money in a document, you can collect from property that has a lien on it, encumbered property. However, if you do it orally, then then you can only collect from property that has no lien on it. So either your real estate that has no lien on it, or your movable property. Turning the page. We had this a week or two ago. A lender pulls out a document with his own writing on it. Or really, the lender pulls out a document with the borrower's writing on it. Says, "I owe you money." It's like an IOU. So, right, the lender wrote the borrower, "I owe you $100," and gave it over to the borrower. And now the borrower pulls it out on him. What's that status? You can only collect from property that does not have a lien on it. Okay. Arev. So now, we spoke on Arev yesterday and the day before. A guarantor. So now, let's say his signature, it can be in one of two places on the document. Before the witnesses or after the witnesses. Arev hayotzi la'achar chitum sharos gova menechasim b'nei chorin. In Arev, a guarantor whose signature comes after the signature of the witnesses. So then you can only be gove minichasim b'nei chorin, meaning I guess if the guy doesn't pay back and this guarantor pays back, he can now only collect from not encumbered property, because it has less of a. I'm sorry. Sorry, the lender, the borrower, the lender can only collect from the arev, from unencumbered property, because we view it as only a this deal with you and the arev is a oral deal. The fact that you wrote it down in the document is irrelevant if it's after the signature of the witnesses. What gives the document its strength is the witness's signature. So if your guarantor's signature is after the witnesses, that's the same as an oral agreement between you and the guarantor. Therefore, you can only collect from the guarantor from his movables or his unencumbered property. Okay. Next, a story that probably happens often. Yeah. Ma'aseh ubalifnei Rabbi Shmuel. Oh, sorry, not yet. V'amar goven chasam b'nei chorin. Okay, sorry. This happened to Rabbi Shmuel where there was a guarantor written on a document after the signatures, and he said the halacha is you can only collect from the guarantor from his unencumbered property. Now, Amar lo benanas is very strict when it comes to guarantors. He says a guarantor's eina go v'lo minichasim v'shabadim v'lo minichasim b'nei chorin. So he cannot collect not from encumbered property and not from non-encumbered property. So Amar lo lama. Why are you so strict with this? You don't let people, for you a guarantor is something which is very light. It has no meaning basically. So he tells you, I'll tell you why. And here's a story that probably happens a lot. So Amar lo, hare hachonik as ha'echad b'shuk. You have a guy strangling somebody in the marketplace, right? And then his friend sees him, Amatzu chaveiro, Amar lo, let him go, hanach lo, let go of him, v'ani eten lecha. I'll pay you money for it. Let go and I'll give you $100. Is he chayav or is he potter? Says bananas potter. Why? Because the guy shelo ala munaso hilveu. The guy didn't give money. The guarantor didn't obligate himself based off of his trust. Meaning, usually a guarantor likes the fact that people trust him. Mm-hmm. With that pleasure that he gets trusted, he goes and he obligates himself. But in this case, he just wanted his friend to let go of the other guy. So basically, he's saying that that an arev, unless you do something very, very significant, we don't assume that an arev is always guaranteeing things because of the trust. Maybe he just wants the guy to lend money, or maybe he just wants the guy to let go of the guy getting choked. We'll see more about this hopefully in about 30 minutes. So Ella Ezehu Arev Shu Chayiv. Bananas, what kind of arev do you say is obligated to be an arev? He says the following: Hilveyu vani nosin lach chayiv. If the arev himself says, "Go lend money and I will guarantee to pay you back," then he's chayiv. Why? Shekain alim unaso hilveyu. He lent the money based off trust. Emuna means trust here. Based off the trust, I like being trusted. The pleasure that I get from being a trustworthy person, that's what makes my guarantee binding. That's only going to work in the case of, in this case. We'll see later. So where do they argue? Meaning maybe everyone agrees to this case. So the Rabbi Shmuel like this. Interesting that this is in the Mishnah. If you want to be smart, you want to be a chacham, you want to be a knowledgeable person in Torah, yasok b'dinei mamonus. Doesn't say you should Google it. It says you should involve and immerse yourself in monetary laws. Why? She'ein lecha miktzah b'Torah. There's no other category in Torah, yoser mehen, that's greater than them. Behein k'maya hanoveya. They're like a wellspring that just is flowing. It's always flowing. The harotesh yasok b'dinei mamonos. And if you want to be involved in monetary matters, what should you do? You should go find Shimon Bananas. Yishamesh es Shimon Bananas. You should hang out with Shimon Bananas. You should really learn a lot. You should means to serve him. It doesn't mean to serve him. It means do shimush means you have to learn from him. Learn how he how he rules all the cases. Learn the tricks of the trade. Nowadays it's called shimush tanach chachamim. When you're by a rebbe for a long time, you watch how they answer questions. You learn from there how to answer questions also. Amar Ula Dvar Torah Echad. Okay, so now all about documents and oral loans. Amar Ula Dvar Torah Echad Malva B'Shtar Echad Malva Pego V'Nchasim Shabadim. Ula is the most lenient. He says biblically, whether you have a loan whether you have a loan orally or a loan written down, biblically it obligates all of your property. All your property has a lien on it. Why? Famous concept, your property having a lien. Is that biblical or is that rabbinical origin? So here's the source. Ma'itama, he holds shibuda d'oraisa. He holds the idea that your property has a lien is a biblical concept, and therefore, anytime you take a loan out, so you now obligate your property to the other person. However, we just had a mission that said orally you cannot collect from any real estate, any encumbered property. What's the reason that an oral loan you can only collect from property that is not encumbered? So, mishum seder de lakuchos. We had this. No one knows about oral laws, so people are going to buy from you, and then it's going to be collected from them. They never knew about this. So to avoid buyers losing out, we don't allow in oral law. We don't allow if the loan, not oral law, the oral loan. Sorry, if the loan is oral, no one knows about it. So therefore, we don't allow you to collect from property. A buyer is going to go and buy land from somebody. Little did he know the land that he bought was actually, lent by somebody who owes $1 million to somebody else, and their creditor is going to come and collect the land. So therefore, we don't allow that. Maybe you should never allow it to prevent, all these situations. Even if it's written down in a document, you should never allow property to be collected. We said, no. That's their own problem. You should go look into it before you purchase something. See, when you buy a car, you look into it, how it works, you take a test drive. So you buy a house, who's the owner, how do you take care of it, all these things. When you take out a loan or when you buy something, find out who is the seller. With it's written down in a document, it's much more available. You can go check out the records. It's a much more known, the documents, than oral loans. That is Ula. V'Rabba Amar Dvar Torah, biblically, Echad Milva Al Bishtar, Echad Milva Al Peh, Eino Go Ve'elam Chaz Mechorim. Biblically, you can never collect from real estate, only from property that doesn't have any lien on it, such as your movable property. My time, what's the reason? Shibuda Lav Deraisa. The fact that your property is automatically a guarantor, it has a lien on it automatically on every time you take out a loan, that's not biblical. That's of rabbinic stature. So why did we allow you to collect from any real estate ever? Why did the rabbi say in order to not close the door in front of lenders? If a lender who cannot collect from your real estate, he'll never lend money. Because he wants to have insurance, and if you can't pay me back, I have something very strong to collect from. Land is always around. Movables can be here today and gone tomorrow. They could break, whatever it is. But land, acres of land, houses, things like that, are generally in one place for a long period of time. So we need economically our society to function. So therefore, we said if you ever lend money in a written document, we allow you to collect from the person's real estate. If that's true, so then you should always allow that to happen, even by an oral loan. Hasam Leslie Kal, it has no voice, meaning it's not a known thing, milva alpeh. So therefore, we're going to cause the lakuchos, the buyers are going to lose out. Okay. Now, what the practical difference if your property being a guarantor is biblical or rabbinic stature? It sounds like everyone agrees to the details. Written in a document, collect from real estate. Oral loan, cannot collect. So what's the difference? I think there's a long footnote about it in the art scroll. You can look at it tonight before bed. Yeah. So
go to sleep.
Or go to sleep. Maybe it'll help you. I don't know. Yeah. So Umi Amar Rabba Hachi. Did Rabba really say that our property, the fact that it's a guarantor for you, is only of rabbinic stature? The Hamar Rabba said Gavu Karka. Amar Rabba Gavu Karka Yeshlo. Gavu Maos Einlo. Rabba himself said that by the case of a Bechor, right? Yeah. By the case of a Bechor gets a double portion. He gets a double portion of land, according to one opinion over there on Kuf Chav Daled, that he gets a double portion, meaning of the loan. I guess the father lent money to somebody. Somebody owes the father money. The Bechor gets a double portion. but he only gets to take the land, not the money. Why the land? Because a bechor, we view it already that it's like the father obligated his land to his son during the father's lifetime. Now the father died, the bechor gets what was already given to him in his lifetime, which means that even in the firstborn's lifetime, the father's land was already meshubet to him, was already had a lien on it towards the bechor. That only works if having a lien from the property is of biblical stature. Because a bechor is obviously biblical, you get double portion. The fact you get a double portion of your father's real estate, it must be that when he was alive, it had a lien on it. This property is always going to go to the firstborn son, even when he was alive. So you see that property that has a lien on it is of biblical, it's biblical, it's not rabbinic, because bechor is a biblical concept. So how can Rabbah say that if Rabbah just told us that shibuda is lav deraisa, having a lien is rabbinic? So maybe you'll tell me v'chitima epoch de Rabbah le'ula, u'de ula le'Rabbah. Maybe you happen to confuse the people, really switch Rabbah and Ula and Rabbah, and therefore won't be a contradiction. You can't switch Ula. Ula said a lien is biblical. You can't switch that. Why not? Amar Ula, Dvar Torah, it says biblically, Bal Chov Dine Biziboris. Anytime you owe somebody money, which land do you collect from? Three kinds of lands. The lowest property, the Echias land, so to speak, the prime time first class land, or Ziboris. So Ziboris is a lesser quality land. But Dvar Torah, biblically, Ula himself said, you can collect from Ziboris. So meaning, Ula says that the fact that you can collect land is biblical, Dvar Torah. So you can't switch Ula and make Ula rabbinic. Ula is the one who says that Dvar Torah, Bal Chov, Dine Beziboris. So now we're stuck. It's Rabbah against Rabbah. Rabbah says that your property having a lien is rabbinic. Rabbah himself says that a firstborn can collect from his father from land. Sounds like that would be biblical. So what do? So really, when Rabbah said this, it was time of the B'nai Ma'arava Kamar, V'lei lo sfirlei. When Rabbah said that Shibuda is lav de'araisa, sorry, the other way, When Rabbah said that a Bechor collects from the land of his father, that's really only explaining the opinion of the Westerners. He's explaining the opinion of the people in Eretz Yisrael. He himself does not agree to that. He himself agrees that biblically a Bechor cannot collect from the land because our property never has a lien to you biblically, maybe rabbinically. But when he said that statement, he was just explaining. He was explaining the opinion of the Westerners, the opinions of Eretz Yisrael. He himself didn't hold of that, so therefore there's no contradiction. Rabbah himself holds shibuda lav deraisa. Having a property have a lien on it is not biblical, and therefore when it comes to a bechor, there shouldn't be a difference about getting a double portion, whether it's from land or from money. At the end of the day, your father's obligations to other people, or their obligations to him, would not transfer necessarily over to you biblically. Maybe rabbinically they did something, but okay. Rav and Shmuel said, Rav and Shmuel, they both say, if you have an oral loan, you cannot collect from inheritors, and you cannot collect from buyers. So an oral loan, you're not able then, if someone owes you money, that guy died, you cannot go to their inheritors, their kids, or whoever inherited them, and you cannot go if they sold property and now they need to pay you back, you cannot go to their buyers. Mai taima, because shibuda is lav de'araisa, because a lien is not biblical. It's only of rabbinic stature. That is Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Amri Shirvayu, Milva Alpeh, an oral loan is gova bein min hayorshin ubein min halakuchos. That you could collect from the inheritors and you could collect from the buyers. Why? Ma'itaima shibuda deraisa. So you have Ula, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rish Lakish all holding this is biblical, and you have Rabbah, Rav and Shmuel holding that it is of rabbinic stature. So now, says the Gemara Meisvei, another unfortunate Bava Batra story. Hachofer bore a guy is digging a pit in a public domain, Bershus Rabbim, and what happened? An ox walked by and fell on him. V'nafal offshore, and unfortunately, Vahargu, it killed him. So now, Potter, the owner of the ox, is exempt from paying. Okay? Below Ella, not only that, she'im meis hashor, that if the ox died, Yorshe Bala Bor, Chayavim L'Shalem Demei Hashor L'Bailav. The guys owning the pit have to go pay the owner of the ox who just killed their father. So, Amar Bala, Amar Rav. Oh, 1 second. So what's the question? The question is, you see here that it's like an oral loan. It was never written down in a document, right? The ox killed somebody. Now that loan is, so that he's not obligated to pay. But now, if the ox dies, so now they do have to pay. But that's like an oral loan. It was never written down in a document. The fact that the ox hurt somebody, and now all of a sudden, what happens? The Yorshim, the inheritors, have to now pay basically their father's debts because their father was digging the pit. It was his pit. The ox killed him, right? And it was in a public domain. The ox goes and the ox died. The father caused the death of the ox. Now the kids have to pay. That was never written down in any document. That's like an oral loan, and yet the inheritors have to pay. So what do you see from there? It sounds like an oral loan. Really, we do obligate the inheritors to pay. It would seem like shibuda, having a lien, is daraisa. So that's a problem for Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel explicitly said that the inheritors do not need to pay, and now we're saying that they do have to pay. So Amar Rav, Amar Rav, no. Bisha Amad Bedin, it's different. The case here by the ox, where they actually had a court, they had a court case. Having a court case is the equivalent of writing down in a document. It has that same status. You're in court, and the judge says you have to pay. No one's going to deny that. That has a koll. Whatever issues you have with an oral loan, this one's not going to have. So that's all. Says the Gemara. What do you mean they had a court case? The hargo katani. He didn't have time. The ox fell on him and killed him. When did he have time for a court case? What does that mean? Hargo katani. So Amrav Adabar Ava Sha'asu Treifa. No, the ox didn't kill him. It gave him a mortal wound. Then there was time before the mortally wounded person died. Then they had the court case. It says, what do you mean? Bahamar of Nachman, Tani Tana Mace V'Kavro. It sounds like Rav Nachman said about this case that no, the ox, it fell on him, he died and buried him. It sounds like 1, 2, 3. there wasn't a time for the mortal wound. He buried him right away. He died and buried him. And the ox got him right to the ground. Okay. We said, no, like this. It's a very funny case. Hassam, there were actually, sounds like there were people that became judges. There were judges sitting by the mouth of the pit. The Yossi Dayani Apuma Debira, the Chayvuhu. And therefore, they're watching this happen. Oh, you're Chayv to pay. We'll deal with Shiva afterwards. Yeah.
You're going to die.
If you dig a pit, don't put any judges near the pit. Make a security fence with a complicated code. And don't tell Jules so you can't open the gate. Yeah. So now, Amar of Papa, after all this, Hilchas of the Halacha is Milva al Peh Govim and Yorshin. You could collect from the Yorshin, the Ain Govim and Alakuchos, but you cannot collect from the buyers. He splits. Does he hold Shibud as Deraisa or Lav Deraisa? Good question. Rav Papa splits. From the Yorshin, you could collect an oral loan. From buyers, you can't. Okay. Govim and a Yorshin. Why? You can collect from the inheritors, or else no one's going to lend money anymore if they can't collect from people's inheritors. The Ain Govim and Alakuchos, but you cannot collect from the buyers. The Leslie Kala, an oral loan, does not have a voice. It doesn't have a koll, and therefore, it's not. There's no way for the buyers to know that the property they bought is actually owed to somebody else, and therefore we say if that happens, we want people to keep buying things, so we don't allow them, or either biblically or rabbinically, they cannot collect from property on an oral loan. Okay, next part of the Mishnah. The lender pulls out an IOU from the borrower. The borrower writes in his own handwriting, I owe you $100, and he gives it over to the lender. The lender can only collect from unencumbered property, not real estate, only the movables. Okay. If the lenders name that he owes him money has been established in Bezdin. What's the halacha? Since it's been established, meaning it's not like this like secret IOU, it went to court. They saw the signature. Is that upgraded to the level of like a written document now? I mean, it just says IOU. It's not it's not an official written document. But now that everyone knows about it, it was the Rashbam says he came to Bezdin. He actually admitted that he owes money, and so now Bezdin established this document as an established document. Do you say that from now it becomes like a document that has witnesses on it? Therefore, you can collect from real estate, or do you say no? It's not going to help. Even though his signature, but even though it's been established in court, you can only collect from nechasim b'nei chorin. It's been established on some level, but it still does not take on the level of an actual written document with witnesses signed. The whole to do.
But the lender wrote it. The lender wrote the document, so
it doesn't have witnesses on it.
There's no witness.
No witnesses, like an IOU.
Yeah, right.
He just wants to ensure that we both know that that
It's not really.
It's a smart thing to do. Like people by Rosh Hashanah, they make a lot of pledges,
But if the
right? So if you write an IOU right after Rosh Hashanah and you give it to the treasurer or something like that, so you have an IOU. There's no witnesses on it, So therefore, it's enough to collect from you, but not enough to have the status of an official written document that has witnesses signed. The whole thing. Right. Yeah, it's like a middle case. Interesting. Maseh Rami Bar Chama. Now we're going to ask a question on this idea of oral loans, I think, and written loans. So, Rami Bar Chama has the following question: Shlosha Gitin. There are 3 documents that are puzzle. However, if you get married, so 3 divorce documents, that they're not good. But if you get married, the kid is kosher. Generally, a woman cannot get married to somebody else. If she does, it's an absolute violation of ish of marrying another husband, and that kid will be considered a mamzer. So, but these 3, they're not good. However, it sounds like they're rabbinically not good, but biblically the kid's going to be fine. What are those? Ve'eluhain kasav b'ksav yado ve'ein lav edim, a document that has no witnesses. Yesh alav edim ve'ein bo zman, it has witnesses but has no zman, no date. Yesh bo zman ve'ein bo ela eid echad, it has the zman, but it does not have. It only has 1 witness on it, not 2. Harei elu. These are the 3 documents, 3 divorce documents. Lo shekitim psulim. V'imnisis avad kosher. Okay. So now, okay. So what's the question? The question is. Oh, not yet. We didn't finish the question yet. That's why. Rabbi Eliezer says, Afal pish even though there's no witnesses there, Ella shenas. Remember, he's the one that holds, not like Rav Meir, that what makes a document as if it's written down it's when it's passed over in front of witnesses. Rav Meir holds you have to sign it, but Rabbi Eliezer holds even if it has no signatures, if 2 witnesses see it being passed over, that already makes the document a valid document. Says Rabbi Eliezer, as long as you give it over in front of witnesses, it's kosher. And you can collect from nechasim mishubadim. So what do you see? This should be similar to our IOU case. The borrower takes out a paper that says that the lender owes him money. There's no witnesses on it. As long as it's passed over, you should now be able to collect from even real estate. And I guess we don't want to say that our Mishnah doesn't hold the Rabbi Eliezer. You can always say that it's like Rav Meir, who holds that the witnesses, he holds that that just seeing it being passed over is not good. But I guess we want Rabbi Eliezer to fit with our Mishnah. So what's the difference between a document being passed over and the IOU being given over? If there's no witnesses on it, it should be the same halacha. Answer is no. Shiny Hasan the Mishas Ksiva who the Shabed Nafshe. Big difference. When a guy wrote the document here that we're talking, this divorce document, let's say, so he was obligating himself. The whole thing was, I'm obligating myself like a regular document. It's just there's no witnesses there. When a guy writes an IOU, he's not necessarily obligating all of his property. He really just wants this loan to just remember that I owe you money, but not necessarily that I'm now obligating myself to you fully. So, the idea that Rabbi Lezer says that when you pass over a document, it works is because it's as if witnesses were signed in the document. So a borrower, right, wrote up one document with witnesses and everything. Now he's writing an IOU. When you're writing an IOU, it's not the same as writing your original document with witnesses. The goal of the original document was, I need to borrow money. Therefore, let's write a document with witnesses and everything. I'll obligate myself to pay you in whatever way I can. When you're writing an IOU, you just want the loan, just to know that the loan still exists. But you never obligated yourself fully to the guy. Therefore, it's a lesser status of a document. So even though there aren't any witnesses on it, it's not going to have the same status as Rabbi Lezer's case. Rabbi Lezer's case is a full-fledged document. Just instead of witnesses signing, he holds that watching it being transferred over has the same status. But that's an original document where you're obligating yourself either by a get or by a regular document. Okay.
But here the borrower wrote the IOU.
The lender wrote it and gave it to the borrower.
The other one was the lender.
The lender wrote IOU money,
Right.
gave it to the borrower. Now the borrower's pulling out on the lender. But when a guy writes his IOU, it's different than his original loan document.
Right.
He's not obligating himself again for everything. He just wants to ensure that the loan is still alive and kicking. Yeah. Arev hayotze la'achar chitim shtaros. A guarantor whose signature is going to come after the witnesses, so that is not going to be valid. That's going to be like an oral loan, meaning a guarantor who signs his name after the witnesses sign their name, meaning that he never had the witnesses sign on his guarantorship. So then that's like an oral loan between the lender and the guarantor. They never formalized their deal in an official document because even though it's written in the official document, but it's after the signatures. So that's not going to be good if they're right before the signatures. Let's see. If you write it down before they sign their names, that's a full-fledged document now. Your guarantorship has been signed by witnesses. Then for sure, the borrower, the lender, can collect from the guarantor's encumbered property, from all of his real estate. But if he writes afterwards, then you can only collect from your unencumbered property. So now, Zimnin, sometimes Rav said, Afilu kodem chitim shtaros, einu gova ela min chatzim b'nei chorin. Sometimes Rav said, even if you signed before the witness is signed, you're still limited and you cannot collect from the guarantor, only from his non-real estate. So 1 second. Kasha de Rav. Rav just said a blanket statement. Before that, nechasim mishubadim. After that, nechasim b'nei chorin. Real estate movables. Now Rav is saying sometimes it's actually you can't collect, even if you sign beforehand, you still can't collect from the real estate. Why not? Kasha the Rav. Rav is contradicts himself. Lo kasha, no. Depends how you wrote it. Had the kasav a ploni arev, had the kasav u ploni arev. Before the witness's signature, do we view the fact that you wrote your name as an independent statement or the continuation of the document? So if it just says Gleizer guarantor, okay, that sounds like a separate statement. Mm-hmm. If you say and Gleizer is the guarantor, that is an extension of the document. So even if it's written before the signature, the witness's signature, we have to see it as a continuation of the document. Has to have that vav. One vav can make a big difference. So yeah. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no. Echad zeh ve'echad zeh, eino gova ela min nechasim b'nei chorin. The afal gav the kasabei u ploni arev. Even if he says u ploni arev, still we don't view it that it's going to be a continuation. That question is why. That's pretty yeah.
If the guarantor signed with witness, but he signed after, but there was witness, right?
Yeah. So the question is why. So let's see. Masiv Rava's going to ask on this now. Eidim achasumin al she'elos shalom beget pasal. Chayshinan shema al she'elos shalom chasm. So you read a document, and in the document you also wrote like a greeting, So if the witnesses, so you wrote hold on, I owe you $1 million, all the details, and at the end it says, by the way, send Mr. Cyber regards, and then Steve and Jared sign, right? So that's possible. Why? maybe they're only signing on the fact that I'm sending you regards. So the Amar Rabbi Abahu, the Didim Farshile Mine, the Rabbi Yochanan, She'elo Apostle, Vishe'elo Kasher. It's only if it's in an independent statement, send him regards. But if I write and send him regards, by the way, I owe him $1 million, and tell him I say hi, and then witnesses sign, then it's going to be kosher. Why? Because the vav is just a continuation. So what is Rabbi Yochanan saying that the vav is not a continuation? We clearly see that it is. Hachanami dekasa ploni arev. So too, so in our case also, if it's ploni arev, it's not good. But if it's viploni arev, it should be good. So now, okay, so now we're saying you're right. Really, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're right. The vav is going to make a big difference. 1 second, but then Rabbi Yochanan is the same as Rav. Hainu de Rav. What's the difference between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan? It sounds like there's a machlokas. Rav said like this, and Rabbi Yochanan said like that. No, there was no machlokas. V'chein amar Rabbi Yochanan. You should add in, and similarly Rabbi Yochanan stated, meaning they both agree, and they both agree that a vav adds, and therefore it's a continuation. Without a vav, not a continuation. Okay. We had a story that the guy choked somebody, and then his friend said, "Listen, let go of him, and I'll pay you $100." Ben Nana said he's not obligated, right? He has to say, "Lend money, and then I will guarantee." Then you are obligated. Rabbi Shmuel as bananas halacha kamoso. Even though Rabbi Shmuel praised bananas in our Mishnah, the halacha is still like Rabbi Shmuel, and not like bananas, that a guarantor can still collect from the unencumbered property, right? Yeah. The case came to Rabbi Shmuel, and he said this case of the Arev signing after the witnesses is an oral obligation. Ben Nanas argued on him. Rabbi Shmuel praised him, but it doesn't mean that he sided with him. He just was praising him that he knows Dinei Mamonos. He knows monetary law. Halacha is like Rabbi Shmuel. So Ibailahu Bechanuk Mali. What would be the case of when the guy choked him? Bechanuk Mali Amar Rabbi Shmuel. What would Rabbi Shmuel, who says in general that if an Arev signs after the signed document, after the witnesses, it's like an oral loan, what would he hold by the case of the guy choking him? The case of choking, he agrees to bananas in that case? He just disagrees in a regular case of a guarantor? Or he'll even argue in the case of the guy getting choked? Even by a guy saying, "Listen, let go of him, I'll pay you $100 if you let go of him right now," still Rabbi Shmuel will disagree with him there. Then we ask, halacha kamoso and halacha kamoso. What's the halacha in the case of being choked? Now that it's a machlokas bananas and Rabbi Shmuel, who's the halacha like? Tashma dechiyas Rabbi, when Rabbi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who was the big rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Yochanan chaluk hay Rabbi Shmuel af bechanuk. Rabbi Shmuel argues even in the case of being choked, meaning the Arev, the guarantor, is obligated now, if the guy let goes of him, that he's obligated now to pay him whatever money he promised him. The halacha kamosa af bechanuk. And we view that there's still, I guess, some level of trust that, the guy enjoys. The guy relied on him, to let go of his friend. And if he promised him $100, then he owes him $100. Interesting. So if you're stuck for money, no, I'm just kidding. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Yeah. So yeah. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Chanuk. What if you're strangling somebody, and now v'kanu miyado, mishtabed. He said, if you're strangling somebody and the guy promises money and does an acquisition, that I will obligate you. So now, what's in that case? Is that case going to obligate you or not? I guess we're really asking according to bananas. It sounds. Oh, no. Sorry, we're stating. You're obligated. Everyone holds. If you're choking somebody and you promise the guy let go of him, and you do a kinyan, you do an acquisition, for sure the Arev has to pay. The guarantor has to pay. Michlal, it sounds like only in the case of choking, but it sounds like in general the Arev alma lo by kinyan. But in general, an Arev, a guarantor, does not require a kinyan, does not require any kind of acquisition. Upligi de Rav Nachman, and this is a head-on collision with Rav Nachman. The Amar of Nachman, Arev de Bezdin, an Arev who's in Bezdin, right? And he goes to court, and he's brought in front of court, and he tells the court, I will guarantee the money. So no greater pleasure than that. You're having the court trust you. That's for sure going to cause the guy to obligate himself. Now that's reliable. Ariv de Bezdin, hu de lo bayi kinyan. An Ariv de Bezdin does not have to do any formal acquisition. The pleasure he gets from Bezdin relying on somebody is enough to obligate himself, to make him fully commit. But ba'alma bayi kinyan, but everywhere else you do need a acquisition. So that's the opinion of Rav Nachman. So meaning, Amar Rabbi Amar Shmuel, he said on the right at the bottom of the previous page, if you strangle somebody, that is such a weak guarantorship, right? Because it's very clear you just want the guy to let go of him. Mm-hmm. So there we make you make an acquisition. If you make an acquisition, then you strengthen your guarantorship, and therefore you for sure owe money. Sounds like if it's not a case of strangling, no need for an acquisition, because we assume that the trust, regular two witnesses trust you, is enough. However, we see that Rav Nachman held in a Bezdin is where you don't need an acquisition. So maybe only Bezdin. There, the judge is relying on you. But if two witnesses, a regular loan, so who says there that's enough pleasure for you that a random guy is going to rely on you, that you're then going to obligate yourself. But haba alma bayi kinyan, that's a machlokas. Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel against Rav Nachman. In every single guarantor, regular guarantor case, a guy loans somebody money and is a guarantor. Does he have to do a formal acquisition or not? Machlokas Shmuel against Rav Nachman. Interesting, because when Shmuel and Rav argue, the halach is always like Shmuel in monetary matters. Also, whenever Rav Nachman's involved, halach is always like Rav Nachman in monetary matters. Now it's Shmuel against Rav Nachman. Be interested to know what you do there. So it sounds like we still go with Shmuel. Haba Alma Bayi Kinyan. The Hilchas of the halacha is Arev, a guarantor. Halacha Lamaisa, B'shas Matan Mos. Next time you're a guarantor, when you're getting everyone to commit to start Sanhedrin tomorrow, right? And you want to guarantee them money if they come to Daf Yomi, you have to know that you have to do B'shas Matan Mos, Lo Bayi Kinyan. Regular guarantorship, when money is being transferred over, you don't have to do a kinyan. There is no acquisition. However, achar matan mos, if it's afterwards already, and now you want to guarantee money for the loan that was, then you do have to do an acquisition. Then it does need a kinyan. Like the case where you wrote down after the witnesses' signatures. In that case, to obligate your encumbered property, there you have to do a kinyan, right? Or else it's just like an oral loan if it's after the witnesses' signatures. Arev de Bezdin, lo bayi kinyan. And Arev who's in Bezdin, so he does not need an acquisition. Why? De bahi hana, de mehemen le, gomer umishabed le. With that pleasure that the judge is going to trust him, Bezdin trusts him to obligate, is enough for him to obligate him money, and therefore gomer, he concludes, he commits umishabed le, and therefore he obligates himself. Hadran Allah get pashut. We'll return to you the parak of get pashut. Vesalik alei Mesechus Bava Batra, and we have completed Mesechus Bava Batra. Mazel tov.
Early you're joking.